Okay guys, welcome to the first in the line of the how-to series. Straight to it, understanding intensity, what weight we need to lift for each individual exercise. How do we calculate it and where does it fit into the scale of the program? So going straight into the topic, this is an infographic that you're going to see come up quite frequently over the next few weeks, and it basically covers the first layer of dose prescription, okay? So how we actually grade exercise exposure throughout the course of a given training phase. Intensity, volume, and frequency, okay? So intensity being how hard you're working, volume being how much you're doing, and frequency being how often you're doing it. Today we're going to be covering how to calculate intensity. Within the prescription, one of the things that we need to make sure we cover straight away is the difference between warm-up sets and prescribed working sets. This little bit of an image here just kind of gives you an idea that certain levels of the intensity spectrum, if we were to use exertion as an example, which is something we'll cover in a little bit more detail in a moment, you'd see that on the lower end, okay, they would be classed as warm-up sets. We don't really need to prescribe them, okay? So we don't really need to focus on them too much. You can do hours and hours of sets at 40% of your exertion, and it won't necessarily tax your recovery or generate too much fatigue. But when we start to go up to the top end of the spectrum, up around this area here, then obviously we need to be a little bit more strict. And it's important to distinguish between this, not only because it influences our recovery, but it also influences the scale of the response that we get from a training session. When we are looking at prescribing the intensities, okay, you'll see on the training program, as you can see on the screen next to me here, that I will have prescribed specific intensities for certain exercises. Whether this comes up as a percentage of 1RM or an RPE is dependent upon the exercise itself. When it's come up as a percentage 1RM, this is taking a percentage of your maximum, okay, and prescribing a weight relative to that. Simple equation here. Again, for some people this might be absolute basics. For others, this might be completely brand new information. You take your max. This could be either your actual max if you have done a 1RM test, or your estimated 1 rep max. You're then going to times that by the percentage that's on the program, or the decimal equivalent, literally, in your calculator. 220 kilo deadlift, you have 75%, it'd come out 165. Now, what happens if we have a sum such as the following, where we have 185 kilo squat, let's say, 79% of it comes out 146.15 kilos. Now, unless you have access to fractional plates, which most gyms don't, it presents a little bit of a problem, okay? In this scenario, there's a couple of different rules and recommendations that we tend to prescribe. First of all, you round down to the nearest 2.5 kilo within the JTS system. Simple to understand phrase that I use, that a lighter weight that you're going to lift gives a greater training effect than one that you can't lift at all. So if you opt to round up and then you miss that weight, you're not going to get any training effect from it, and in some instances you can actually revert backwards because of the whole psychological effect that you have on strength that you'll learn as you go through the program. So I always recommend to round down to the nearest 2.5 kilos. If you are a consistent lifter, then you need to be going with your max that is estimated on the training program. If you are an inconsistent lifter, so you're someone who works shift patterns, you have to be feeling really good on a particular day, and you see a large degree of variability dependent upon how you feel when you walk into the gym, then I actually recommend that you go with 90% of your max. So again, going back to that equation earlier, you'd use an estimated 1 rep max. You literally take 100 kilogram bench press, times it by 0.9, that's 90 kilos, that is your max that you will then do any subsequent calculations from, okay? If you're an absolute beginner, don't worry about this section. This is purely for people that have a little bit more training experience under the belt, and we just look at how we progress the program as they go through. So, what if I don't know my max, okay? This is where RPE becomes really, really important. You can use your most recent top set, again with the estimated 1 rep max calculator. In a few sessions time, you'll actually see one of these pre-training content episodes that talks you through how to use the estimated 1 rep max calculator spreadsheet that is in your profile right now. If you go to the coaching items section, you'll see it on the screen next to me here, and it will take you straight through to Google Sheets that has the most up-to-date 1 rep max calculations that are available. You can use a max out session before you start. So if you've got the training program and you've signed up to the JTS system, you can do a session earlier where you literally just work up to a top single for each of the given exercises and go from there. Or you can use, as I said, RPE and exertion. Now, in this situation, RPE is literally a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being your absolute limit, 1 being completely negligible. We can also link RPE to roughly what's known as reps in reserve. Well, basically an RPE 10 would be you have no reps left in the tank whatsoever. So if it's 8 reps on the program and we say to do it for an RPE 10, you need to find a weight where the 8th rep is your absolute limit. There is no way you could go beyond that. If you had an RPE 9, you would work up to a weight where you'd have 1 rep left in the tank, and so on and so forth, all the way down. 6 or less, like I said, anything past that point that would be classed as a warm-up set like we discussed at the start. A couple of rules and recommendations for the RPE side of things: you need to be honest, okay? A lot of extroverted people tend to underestimate how difficult the exercise actually was, and introverted people do the opposite. So you need to be honest with yourself when we say, if it's an RPE 7, could you have done 3 more reps? Preserve quality and build momentum, okay? If it says RPE 7 in week 1 on the JTS system and RPE 8 on the following week, ideally the weight would be heavier. Now, obviously, when it comes to auto-regulation, this isn't always feasible, but that would be something that you want to bear in mind. And make a note on how it felt. As you can see on the screen here, every single exercise, you have a section where you can input specific notes. So if you make a note how it felt on that particular session, again, if you're relatively inconsistent because of other things that are going on in your life, you can make reference to that next time you come to do the exercise. So that's it in terms of understanding how to calculate the intensity. Just as a summary, you have calculating the percentage of 1 RM, you just do a decimal equivalent with your max. Your max can come from an estimated 1 rep max or your actual max from the most recent test you did, or we can use the RPE scale where you actually find the weights relative to how many reps you have left in the tank. As always, stay strong and I'll see you on the next one.